Oh, hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, depending on which part of this beautiful country that you're in. You're watching Rebel Roundup. Rebel News is daily news and opinion show. I'm the regular host here, Sheila Gunn Reid, and I'm joined today by my friend and colleague, the very hardworking Tamara Ugolini from Cobourg, Ontario. Tamara, how's it going?
Well, it's been a busy few days, and I'm sure you can also attest to that, Sheila. But it's going well. Glad to be here on the live stream to chat about the craziness that is unfolding here in Canada. And how are you feeling over there on the western side of things?
Finally getting some rain. We're finally get, and now it seems, like it's it's drought and fires, and then there's just too much rain and you can't get your hay off. But welcome to Canada. The crazy people will call it climate change, but this is just seasonal weather if you actually pay attention to it, which is something we're going to get into because there's a senator who wants to BDS the oil and gas industry. We'll talk about that, but we should tell everybody what we're doing around here. And I will turn that over to you to do that for once.
Yeah, sure. So if you're not familiar with our stream, this is our daily 5 day a week stream where we discuss and go through some of the hot topics of the day. And we're streaming on a couple different platforms. So you can join us on YouTube, which we've been remonetized on. So we appreciate anyone who wants to chip in to support our journalism and our efforts and share any tips, tricks, or comments by giving a $5 or more, if you feel so inclined, donation there. It's called a super chat. And then we're also streaming on Rumble. And so on Rumble, you can give us what is called a Rumble rant. Again, if you feel so inclined, we always appreciate it. And it's a great way for our viewers to not only support our work, but also engage with us directly and have your comment read live on air. And we are also streaming on X. So depending on which is your platform of choice, you have a few different ways to connect with us. And so we have a couple things to talk about, as Sheila mentioned, the attacks on oil and gas, the gun grab, which is always a hot topic and one of Sheila's expertise. And then, of course, we have Ontario Premier Doug Ford ranting about immigration. I think yesterday you chatted about how he was ranting about crime.
Right.
Seemingly the two go hand in hand, as it appears to be increasingly the case. And then we'll get into our daily dose of cringe at the very end. So make sure that you stick around for that. So,
All right.
without further ado, we have one of Canada's senators who wants to, as the headline says, from the Calgary Sun, torpedo Canada's oil and gas industry. This
Yeah,
comes
she's
from
sorry to interrupt. She's proposing this thing called the Climate Aligned Finance Act, or CAFA, which, as Ken Green writes in the Calgary Sun, which would basically bring in a form of boycott, divestment, and sanction to Canada's oil and gas sector. Um, it would essentially treat Canada's oil and gas sector like an enemy of the state, where all values are subordinate to greenhouse gas emissions controls. So, alignment with national climate commitments means that everyone engaged in federal investment in emission intensive activities, and he says, read the oil and gas sector, must give precedence to that duty over all other duties and obligations of office, and for that purpose, ensuring the entity is in alignment with climate commitments and is deemed to be a superseding matter of public interest. So he says in plain English, CAFA would require anyone involved in federal financing. So this farmers, maybe you're not in the oil and gas sector, although I don't really know a farmer currently who's not in the oil and gas sector. This could mean you too, right? Because they've already come after animal agriculture and crop production as something that is carbon intensive. Beef producers, I'm looking at you. Or it could be federally regulated financing if you are applying through Farm Credit Canada, which is a federal bank for farmers. This could affect you too. Of the oil and gas sector to divest their Canadian federal investments in the oil and gas sector, and the government would sanction those who argue against it. And I think what's interesting here is when they say federally regulated financing, because almost all financing is federally regulated, which potentially this could mean that banks could decline financing or maybe insurance to companies whose projects don't align with Canada's climate targets. So this is a prohibition through uh, bureaucratic inhibition of the ability to finance project. And if this sounds crazy, this is exactly what Mark Carney did when he was with the United Nations through GFANZ and the Glasgow, it's like a climate finance thing. And all he did there was work to definance and defund and de-insure major oil and gas projects. That's what he did there. This is just her bringing this home and taking it out of the global sphere and putting it into law here in Canada. It's not crazy. It's something that Mark Carney has done for years.
Yeah, well, and this senator actually had proposed this piece of legislation before Trudeau prorogued Parliament on January 6th earlier this year. So it had died on the vine. And
Right.
now she's trying to reinvigorate it under Mark Carney's leadership, which, I mean, typically I think senators, their legislation doesn't go through anyway, but it's not to say that it doesn't promote or entice future legislation. And I mean, as is typical with horrible legislation, it's just so loosely worded and the verbiage is so ambiguous that it's so much is left open to individual interpretation. And that's just not, in my view, good legislation. They can't even define climate expertise.
No.
So the article goes on to say, CAFA says it includes people with experience in climate science, social science, and Indigenous ways of knowing, and
What
people
does
who
that
have
mean?
acute lived experience
I've got
related to
that.
the physical or economic damages of climate change. I mean, this is just you just innately will know, I guess, and we'll just have to take your word for it, and you'll self-identify as someone who has climate expertise. And we see that happening in
Right.
all sectors where
And
self ID politics and your own definition of whoever you may be or what you identify as is fine until you try to identify as a journalist and get access to your public officials.
yeah, I mean, what they mean is not people like me, right? Like they mean people who have climate anxiety because they were sufficiently scared by Greta Thunberg, but who never get their Birkenstocks off the pavement. They don't mean people who make a living on the land, people who make a living relying on the weather gods like I do as a farmer. They don't mean somebody like me who is raising the third generation of her family to work in the oil and gas sector. They don't mean that. They don't mean people who hunt and gather and pay attention to the ebbs and flow of nature. That lived experience, nope. They need someone who is sufficiently scared at a Greta Thunberg protest. They mean that sort of climate expertise. And at the end of the day, this is just a cynical end run around provincial jurisdiction. Because as you know, Alberta and Saskatchewan are currently fighting the feds in court to stay in their lane. Oil and gas and mining and minerals are provincial jurisdiction. The federal government should not have its hands in any of this. They know that. They're probably making plans for when they lose in court to Alberta one more time. So this is how they're getting around it. They're saying, okay, well, we don't have any jurisdiction over oil and gas, but we do federally regulate financing. So this is what we're going to do. And this is all happening in the backdrop of Saskatchewan basically giving Ottawa the middle finger when it comes to coal. Saskatchewan is not taking its coal plants offline. Good for them. I'm envious of them because here in Alberta, we've got 800 years of some of the cleanest burning coal on the face of the earth under our feet. We can't use it. We just have to deal with rolling brownouts. But Saskatchewan is saying, we are keeping our coal plants offline. And why wouldn't they? And Ottawa has no jurisdiction to stop it. And so that is true. Ottawa can't stop the coal mining, the use of coal-fired electricity for to provide to the people of Saskatchewan. So what they're going to do is make sure that these plants don't have appropriate financing.
Yeah, and I mean, whatever happened to elbows up Canada and shop local and buy Canadian products? I mean, Canada has an opportunity to be a global energy superpower by utilizing the extensive resources that we have available to us through the oil and gas sector. And instead of doing that, we have a senator calling on legislation that relies on some ambiguous definition of people stacking an advisory board with people who have so-called climate expertise and divesting investments from Canada's oil, the mandates divestment of investments of Canada's oil and gas sector. So this is not at all a Canada First approach, if you ask me, which is the entire basis of Carney's campaign a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Ask me how I feel about Canada First when Canada says that we cannot use our coal-fired electricity here in Alberta, and then we have to go hand in hand to Saskatchewan. But if Saskatchewan doesn't have capacity, because frequently they're suffering the same extreme deep freeze that we do that causes electricity alerts, we have to buy coal-fired electricity from Montana when we could be just producing it ourselves. A lot of times it's the same coal seam, same coal bed, but we have decided that we're not getting off coal-fired electricity. We're just actually getting off coal-fired electricity jobs because we're buying the coal-fired electricity from Montana, Wyoming, our friends in Saskatchewan. It's just stupidity. And when you think about the energy resources that we have here in the West, and by extension, the rest of Canada, at least for now, we have like 8 times the oil and gas, 8 times the oil resources as Texas. 8 times, like 800%. We produce 60% of the nation's natural gas here. And as I alluded to, nearly a millennia of coal under our feet. And yet, think about the respect that Texas is treated or that Texas is due within the United States. I mean, everybody's just like, yeah, Texas energy superpower. We're 8 times more energy rich than they are just on the one resource. And, you know, I haven't even discussed timber, food, and yet we're treated like the ugly stepchild of Confederation. It's the most bizarre thing that we are not an energy superpower. It's malfeasance of the highest order.
Yeah, and this is really in line with Saskatchewan government and Scott Moe Premier's stance for things like not collecting the federal carbon tax while it was still being implemented. So this defiance by these provinces of Alberta, Saskatchewan, it's really, I think, setting a strong precedent and showing the federal government, like, we're not going to just kowtow to your every demand and your ridiculous regulations. And so far, it looks like they're winning.
Yeah. I mean, I think our response to everything from the feds should just be, we'll see you in court. Like, I think from now on, that's just like, here's your lawsuit. We'll see you in federal court. Thank you very much.
Or just no, because that's a full sentence. No,
right.
Sorry. No, we're not doing it.
We're not doing that. And also, what are you going to do about it? You know, Scott Moe didn't collect the carbon tax. You didn't do anything. You didn't take him to jail. Like, nothing. By the way, you need some real big handcuffs. That guy's got like cinder blocks for hands. But they didn't do anything. Like, stare him down. What are the feds going to do? Cart you off to jail? You're going to put Danielle Smith in jail? Just like, what are you going to do? Like, what's Mark Carney going to do to you at the end of the day?
I think if more provinces started to call that bluff, we would be a lot further ahead in utilizing Canadian investments and the oil and our energy sector, and really start to thrive once again.
Yeah. I mean, also that senator and her crazy bill. Imagine being somebody like Cenovus, Imperial Oil, or even like BP, like a big multinational energy company. And you're looking to invest maybe, I don't know, 10, 20, maybe $50 billion in a project in Alberta, Saskatchewan. and you have a crazy senator in the House of Commons proposing anti-finance legislation, you'd be like, you know what? I'm going to go to Nigeria, where
Hmm.
all I have to do is pay off the local warlord and I can get my project done. It's a lot easier than dealing with the liberals.
Yep, elbows up. There we are once again, not actually working in the interest of Canadians. But
Oh,
another news in Saskatchewan, the government is now recording as many as 30 incidents under investigation for arson related to wildfires, because the public is continually being sold on the wildfires are part of climate change and climate hysteria and the climate crisis, and we have to take all of these steps, including legislation being proposed by this radical senator, to curb greenhouse gas emissions and stop global warming and all these things. But when you look at what is really happening and dig into under that surface layer of hysteria, you find that actually people and arson is responsible for these wildfire attempts. I think
yeah,
there was a video embedded in this article. I
yeah,
don't know if it's just not working for me, but anyway, so this follows, I think, just last week or 2 weeks ago, they said the majority of wildfires are being human caused.
of
And
course.
now like 30 incidents. That's a large amount.
Yeah, well, in Saskatchewan, they're major wildfires, and you know what? For an NDP premier who probably has a lot of other crazy things that he says, Wab Kinu's been really good on this in Manitoba. When he was sort of pressed by uh, reporters to say, like, don't you think this is climate change? And he's like, we are still investigating these fires, and at least two of them have been arson. So let's not jump to making excuses for arsonists. In Alberta, our premier has been really open about saying most of these fires that are, in our forested areas, and I think, we have an incredible amount of boreal forest in Alberta. Um, most of them were caused either by arson, negligence, or at the very least, human caused. They are not climate change. But imagine being an arsonist and like getting away with it because everyone's like, no, it's climate change. And you're just the local firebug. And the politicians are making excuses and taxing innocent people because of you.
Well, that's just in and the damage and the destruction
Ugh,
that these acts have caused, and then are capitalized on by our state broadcaster, for instance, as to promote this fear and hysteria around the climate, and used as leverage and justification to implement all of these things around climate action and greenhouse gas emission reduction and your carbon credits and things like this. And then there's 30 people, 30 incidents. It doesn't say how many people are involved with each of them, but also I'd like to know what is the punishment for conducting these
right,
kinds of arson attempts. Not even attempts, these are arson attempts that then cause massive destruction and damage.
right. I mean, you'll never recoup what they've destroyed. You'll never recoup the firefighting costs. And we also know that this is a country of catch and release of the bad guys.
Yeah.
He's going to go there, claim that he's having personal struggles, who isn't, and then get a slap on the wrist and maybe, you know, 6 months behind bars and out you go. But irreparable damage is done to people.
Mhm.
Like you just think about like when houses burn in our forested communities. That's everything. Like stuff is replaceable, but like family photos, albums, mementos, that stuff is gone forever. And I don't think people face the repercussions that they should for these kinds of things. It's always by the grace of God that and pro honestly proper oil field training, that there is almost no loss of life with these major massive wildfires. I would say the same about Saskatchewan and Manitoba also. These wildfires are ripping through places where everybody is trained in evacuation, confined space, respiration, first aid, CPR, H2S training. So, that's why the entire city of Fort McMurray was able to evacuate when it burned, or at least a third of it burned, in short order in orderly fashion without chaos. And the only death that happened was a highway traffic accident on the way out of town. And it's because of the close relationship with industry, which is ironic because the climate change activists would love the industry to go away. Speaking of which, speaking of industry going away, Don Davies, NDP lunatic in the House of Commons, he's the leader, actually, so this madness should be of no surprise. He says, today in Parliament, I introduced the National Renewable Energy Strategy Act, which mandates a national strategy to achieve 100% renewable electricity generation in Canada by 2030. Saskatchewan says no thank you, by the way. And this is why the NDP has just, half a dozen MPs. So let's hear from him.
I'm honored to rise today to introduce the National Renewable Energy Strategy Act. I thank my colleague from Rosemont-La Petite Patrie for seconding this legislation and all his work to protect our environment. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has been clear that we must cut global greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050 to avert catastrophic global climate change. The time for action is now. That means implementing solutions for clean energy and transitioning away from fossil fuels. While we do this, we must ensure that workers are not left behind. Jobs in Canada's clean energy sector are projected to grow by nearly 50% by 2030, and the industry's GDP contribution is on track to reach $100 billion by the end of this decade. This legislation would accelerate our transition to a clean energy future by requiring that the Minister of Natural Resources develop and implement a national strategy to ensure 100% of electricity generated in Canada comes from renewable energy sources by 2030. I call on all parliamentarians to support this vital initiative for our country and for our planet.
This is 5 years from now. Like, these people are just so out to lunch. Like, what reality are you living in where you think that this would actually be achievable in the next 5 years? It's staggering to me.
Thank you, Mr. Vancouver Kingsway, but it gets to be below -40 here in the winter, and we get about 6 hours of usable daylight. What the hell else are we supposed to do with our time? Should I just burn firewood to keep warm? Are we going to outlaw that too? Like, this guy is living in a very distinct, as I said, his Birkenstocks don't leave the pavement kind of bubble in the temperate climate of Vancouver Kingsway. I've seen what happens to Greater Vancouver when those people get a skift of snow in the wintertime. We're supposed to be on 100% renewable. We polluted our grid in Alberta with renewables. And as energy rich as we are threatened with rolling brownouts in the darkest parts of winter because we rely on renewables, because we were unable to build out natural gas backup in a timely fashion, thanks to old Rachel Notley, our former premier of the NDP, scaring away investment like some sort of scarecrow in the field. So places that try renewables, they try and fail unless you're some sort of equatorial region. But this is a big, vast, cold, sparsely populated place, at least in most of the country outside of the major city centers. And Mr. Don Davies would do well to visit those places and talk to those people, because I'm not freezing to death to achieve his sort of net zero utopia.
I think he should take an electric vehicle out to some of the most northern parts of Alberta in peak winter and see how far he gets, and then decide what is it that he's going to do when he's stranded on the side of the road because his battery died in -40 weather with this 100% renewable vehicle that he has opted to rely on exclusively. Like, this is just absolute craziness that these people are proposing, which makes sense that they're not even considered, like, they're not even a recognized party in Canada's parliament anymore, because this is the kind of extremism that comes from their mouths, unrealistic extremism. And I wanted to just note too that in all of the upholdings of democratic due process, of course, Don Davies has restricted who can reply to his clip here on his
Naturally.
X account. So he has been absolutely ratioed in the quotes of this clip because nobody can comment under it to let them know how they really feel.
He's got me
So
blocked. I just realized he's got me blocked on
Oh,
Twitter
well,
because I was
that's
like, I should quote.
illegal.
Well, he's
Not
not in
illegal, but
government, but it is in bad faith. If he were using government resources to run this account, we'd see him in court. But this is just pathetic. I went
yeah.
to quote tweet it to say, like, I noticed when I was in Kananaskis, they have like behind the casino there. Um, there's like a native run casino on Kananaskis land, and they have their obligatory chargers, electric vehicle chargers outside of the casino. And I noticed that they were never being used, like ever, ever, ever. The RCMP had parked their ATVs in the stalls there, and then there was an empty flat deck trailer, which obviously had been there, which like carted in the RCMP ATVs, but there were no electric vehicles there because they're a good hour out of Calgary. So yeah, I was just gonna share that photo with him, but he has me blocked like a baby.
Of course. Yeah, we love democracy until it means that we become criticized by independent media.
Yeah.
All right, to wrap up this segment, we have some remarks here from Melissa Landsman. She's the Conservative Deputy House Leader, and well, we'll just, it's almost a 3-minute clip, but I think it's good enough to share in full.
Yeah, it's funny.
The government wants to make these illegal. Well, not these, but they want to ban gas-powered cars. Not in 100 years, not someday, but in 2035, 10 years from now. This is a crazy proposal, but let's indulge for just one moment. What do we need to get this over the finish line? We need 700,000 new charging stations across the country. We've only built 60,000. And in 2024, we actually built fewer than the year before that. The electrical infrastructure to power all of these cars, to say that we're even close would be a joke. This would also be a massive increase to the total electricity consumed in this country. This is fantasy land. The rebate program, it ran out of money 2 months early, but the mandates, they're staying. It's like telling Canadians they have to eat steak every night and then cutting their grocery budget and calling it a climate plan. It's insane. Auto CEOs are sounding the alarm. Canadian economists say that you could lose 38,000 jobs in this sector. This isn't innovation. It's economic sabotage, and it's happening right here in this country.
Absolutely, and I don't personally own a vehicle. I've never owned one, but my service vehicle as minister is 100% electric vehicle. So I totally understand what some of the challenges are. I'm living it.
In places outside of downtown ridings of the environment minister and her trusty sidekick, the heritage minister, it's not just inconvenient, it's impossible. There's no chargers for hundreds of kilometers, -40 weather, long-haul drives just to get groceries, but Ottawa thinks they know better than you. Not everyone wants a Tesla. Electric vehicles might be a smart choice for some, but they shouldn't be forced on everyone, because this isn't policy. It's some crazy ideology. Canadians can't afford groceries or housing, and let alone a brand new Tesla with no rebate and nowhere to charge it. We know that these guys backtrack when things get unpopular. Remember how the carbon tax was gonna save the world? Here's what's gonna happen. I'm gonna predict the future. Just like the carbon tax that made gas and groceries and everything you buy more expensive, they'll reverse themselves on this one too. But they will wait until the dealerships are out of business and the plants are shut down and make the change and convince you that it was a good idea that they couldn't communicate and it was your fault. Don't let them. Stop this before it hurts more Canadians. Conservatives will stand up for workers, for consumers, for common sense, and not for this mandate. Yes to freedom of choice, with a real plan that actually works for Canadians before they trounce the auto sector.
Yeah, that was a really well done video.
Yeah, like, did I hear that properly? Gilbo has never actually owned a car? Is that
And
true?
yet,
Like,
here we are legislating what people can and can't drive, and you've never even driven.
well, yeah, and he says, well, my service vehicle. Oh, you mean the vehicle provided to you at no cost to you by the taxpayer is an EV. Well, congratulations, but you didn't have to buy that yourself. You didn't have to trade in your reliable Jeep Grand Cherokee like I have for what? A Cybertruck? By the way, is a Cybertruck going to pull my holiday trailer? I don't know, but I know my Jeep Cherokee does pull my ultralight holiday trailer just fine.
I'm pretty sure we've caught Guibault out in the field multiple times, not with an EV or hybrid entourage. I mean, and he's not only traveling with just one vehicle, they quite literally are traveling with an entourage of vehicles that are not electric or hybrid, contrary to whatever nonsense he was spewing there.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a video out about Mark Carney and his wife, the net zero zealots. I thought, and I was watching the live stream because what else can you do when you're penned up in the gulag with the other journalists in Banff at the G7? But I was like, did she just get into a separate full-size idling Suburban? And then I was like, Sheila, don't jump to conclusions. Maybe she's not going to the G7. She could be going somewhere else. And then I watched the live stream of them arriving at the G7 and Mark Carney doing that weird bow thing that he did. It was bizarre. But I was like, oh, she's there too. So they just didn't ride in the same vehicle for the hour to get to Kananaskis. While we've got the likes of Guilbeault, who doesn't even actually own a car, has never actually made a car payment in his life, telling us what we should drive to save the planet. No effing thank you at all. Yeah. I mean, Freeland also doesn't own a car, but she's clocking speeding tickets where she should be losing her license in Alberta. So I'm not taking vehicle advice from any of these people. Sorry, no.
Nor should we be mandated on what we can and can't buy by these people who don't own vehicles themselves and instead get to rely on the endless trough of the taxpayer's dime to shuttle them and chauffeur them to and from all of their super necessary public engagements.
How many large round hay bales do you think a Cybertruck can pull out of the field? Like, when somebody can give me that answer, maybe I will consider a Cybertruck. Actually, might even be cheaper.
And what do we do in 20 to 25 years when the solar panels no longer work? They can't be recycled. They leach toxic waste into the groundwater. And these wind turbines are massive, also have a lifespan, also can't be recycled, and also leach toxic waste into the groundwater. So what is the plan here? Because it seems extremely short-sighted.
Also, so far, electric vehicles are all but disposable. They're very big disposable vehicles. They're sort of like your cell phone. They have like a battery lifespan. And when the battery goes on these things, it's cheaper to get a new car than replace the battery. And how do you think those batteries are going to hold up with repeated charging in -40? They are going to run out their life cycle real fast. So to say that these things are even environmental is absolutely wrong, because you can tinker with a combustion engine for a very long time before it becomes cheaper to get your hands on a new vehicle than continue to repair the one that you have. Like you see cars on the road that are 20, 25, 30 years old routinely. You see a Chrysler Magic Wagon out there all the time. Electric vehicles, not so at all.
No, and they cannot be recycled. Anyway, we have spent a lot of time on that. Thank you for coming to our extra long TED Talk about renewables. We'll hit a quick ad break, and then we'll come back to talk about the ever climbing cost involved with the gun grab.
Yeah.
Tired of supporting woke coffee companies that hate your values? Tired of drinking coffee that comes with the burnt, bitter taste of communism? Switch to fresh roasted, specialty coffee From a family-owned company built on faith, family, and freedom. Skip the shipping. Get free coffee and some cash for gas, groceries, and ammo by becoming a Resistance Coffee Outpost today.
Canadians know the national anthem. They stand in silence to remember those who died for this country. But not every Canadian knows their rights and freedoms. The Freedom Passport will change that. It looks and feels like a Canadian passport, but contains the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in a portable, easy-to-read format. The Freedom Passport. Order one for yourself and for all the freedom lovers that you love at freedompassport.ca.
Do you agree with me? It is time to make Canada great again. And that is why we at Rebel News have teamed up with MCGA hats to introduce, well, the fashion sensation of 2025. Oh, and by the way, these beautiful hats, they are made in Canada. We don't rely on cheap imports coming over from China. So what are you waiting for, folks? Show your pride. This is the perfect thing for a patriot to wear, or maybe there's a patriot in your life that you would like to gift such a hat. Please go to mcgahats.ca. That's mcgahats.ca. Don't be shy about it. Wear this cap. Let everybody know you want to make Canada great again.
All right.
All right.
We've got a article here from Blacklock's reporter saying that the federal government has put a gun buyback program at $340, let's say $3 million, so a little over $1/3 billion. Everything the federal government has said about any of their gun legislation has been wrong, particularly when it comes to cost estimates. They said it would cost 60 million, then it ballooned, and then it ballooned, and then it ballooned. And here is the most important part of all of this, is that the numbers they are relying on to pin this down at $343 million are 13 years out of date. And so in the last 13 years, people have purchased AR-15s. Now they know about those, but there are a lot of guns that went directly from non-restricted, as in non-tracked. The government doesn't know who has them, doesn't know if you have them, doesn't know who sold them to you, because they've never been a problem until Justin Trudeau decided they were a problem. They have gone from regular, unregistered, non-restricted firearms right across to prohibited. And that happened to thousands of models. And so when you have no clue how many of these things are in the country, how do you even pin down a cost estimate? They're just making it up as they go. This is going to cost over $1 billion. I would suggest $2-3 billion at the very least. And then you've got policing put into this. What would you rather have, Canadians? Hospitals? How about more cops on the streets to deal with the actual bad guys than to come along and take a fancy Brazilian 410, which I wouldn't use to shoot a duck. It's not high-powered enough, from the hands of a collector, which is what Mark Carney and the Liberals think is what's going to put a dent into the rising crime rates and the severity of crime in this country.
Well, what I found really interesting about this article, and it's about 4 paragraphs down, that there are additional costs to this program relating to the destruction of firearms by a third-party destruction services provider. I mean, this is craziness. So they've had to hire now also a third-party destructor of firearms. And they say, yeah, go ahead, Sheila.
Well, and here's the thing. They're having a tough time getting people to want to do business with them here, because the firearms owners in this country are a very well organized bunch. They can move a lot of things by the numbers. the shooting sports is the national sport of this country. We don't like to talk about it. Why? Because the feds will come and grab your guns. You don't want to talk about what you have, because you never know when you end up on the wrong side of a prohibition order. But by the numbers, more people are engaged in the shooting sports as licensed firearms owners than play organized hockey. That's a huge number of people, but they're quiet because they're tired of the attacks of the federal government. And so that's why I know this number is way too low. In 2021, they said it could be upwards of nearly $800 million. Again, triple that, quadruple that. But my point is, you are going to have a hard time finding contractors willing to do this work for the federal government, because firearms owners will organize against you.
Yeah. And I mean, repeatedly, this doesn't do anything to stop gun-related crime. Like, this is the whole crux of the issue, is that this is just a complete waste of resources, of money, of time, for an issue that will still continue unabated, because targeting legal, lawful, law-abiding gun owners is not going to do anything to curb the illegal smuggling of illegal guns. Like this, it's just again, part of some sort of fantasy world that we live in under the Liberal and NDP reign of terror, thinking that this will do anything to stop gun-related violence and crime.
We are going to be a sanctuary place for firearms owners fleeing persecution in the rest of the country in Alberta. We've got Ruby Sahota, who's Secretary of State for Nonsense. She's responsible for combating crime. And Natalie Provo, who is the Secretary of State for Nature, if I recall correctly, while being one of the people who goes after legitimate conservationists like firearms owners. They are in the House of Commons, or they were, alleging that it's licensed firearms owners, the people who jump through the hoops to follow all the rules, the ever-changing landscape of rules, who have to know the rules better than even the police, because if we don't know the rules, we'll go to jail. Anyways, these two loons allege that it's licensed firearms owners who are the real problem with violent crime in this country, and not the criminals. So this is, we've got the Conservative MP from Quebec, Dominique Vienne, talking about this in the House of Commons, and then she has the misfortune, I believe, of being oh no, it's just a statement from her. I was going to say she has the unfortunate problem of being addressed by those two Looney Tunes, but she's pointing out the history of statements from Ruby Sahota and Natalie Provo.
Feminicides since the beginning of the year in Quebec. 5 in 5 weeks, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, a woman was killed in Vaudreuil-Dorion. She was in a situation where there was a toxic relationship, a violent relationship. The system abandoned her like so many others before her. When will the Prime Minister fix the errors of his predecessor, Mr. Trudeau, who contributed to leaving these women without protection?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Combating Crime.
Mr. Speaker, every Canadian should feel safe in their community, especially in their home. We will automatically revoke gun licenses for individuals convicted of intimate partner violence offences.
That's already a thing.
Subject to protection orders. We are delivering on the recommendations made by the Mass Casualty Commission related to community safety, policing, and countering gender-based violence. The implementation of the National Action Plan to combat gender-based violence continues to support the work of building a Canada free of gender-based violence that supports victims, survivors, and their families, no matter where they live.
These people are so out to lunch.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Etchemins-Lévis. The facts are the facts, Mr. Speaker. Under the Liberals, violence against women keeps going up. By maintaining Justin Trudeau's bills C5 and C75, this government is choosing to protect criminals instead of victims. In the meantime, women are living in fear. This government needs to look at itself and understand that it is responsible for the problem. When will the Prime Minister act, change these laws, and ensure the safety of all women in Canada, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Secretary of State for Nature. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for her question. I'm very emotional rising in the House on this subject.
Oh, gosh.
I'm standing here as part of this Liberal government because up until March this year, the Liberal government worked tirelessly to reduce the danger of firearms for Canadians by investing in that area and by banning assault weapons. There's more that needs to be done. We need to go as far as we can. That's what a government does when it fights crime.
They're not fighting any crime, though.
No.
That's the whole point. And
They're
I
creating
wonder,
a class of criminals. Like they're
Yeah.
creating a class of criminals and then dealing with that class of criminals instead of taking $1 billion and putting it into policing border issues. Where do you think all the illegal guns are coming from?
Yep.
There's two ways. The homeowners and firearms owners who are robbed, they're the victims of a crime, not the perpetrators of a crime, and yet you're punishing them, and across the porous border. So let's invest in policing and invest in the border, which would also deal with the whole fentanyl problem too. But we don't want to do that. We're going after duck hunters and wondering why people are less safe.
I wonder what the Minister of the Environment thinks of the third-party destruction services provider and whether or not that will be very environmentally friendly.
I am perturbed that Natalie Provost, formerly of Police Souviant, the largest gun grabbing organization in this country, is now the Secretary of State for Nature, which would make her responsible for conservation and hunting. When she has just an absolute deranged hate on for the people who care for the animals of this country and making sure that appropriate populations of these animals exist at no cost to the taxpayer. It just, it boggles the mind. It's such an insult, but
well, and it's highlighting the pattern of the Liberals. What's the public safety minister guy? I never get his last name right. Ash, what is it, Sheila?
Gary,
sorry.
Ananda Sangari. I just enjoy saying his name as much as I dislike him.
He didn't even know the difference between the different styles of firearm that are banned or not banned. Like, these people, how do they even get these portfolios when they quite literally have no idea what they're talking about?
Right. I guess they get them by being just loyal soldiers, right? I mean, besides the fact that Gary Ananda Sangari doesn't know his portfolio, he was a lawyer for terrorists. Like what are you doing at public safety, Gary? And the fact remains he can fundraise a lot from the Tamil community. So that's why he's rewarded with a cabinet position, regardless of his idiocy and his ties to known terror organizations like the Tamil Tigers. Speaking of people who don't know their portfolio, our immigration minister, whose name completely escapes me, there was that back and forth with her and Michelle Rumpel-Garner about a week ago where she just didn't have a clue about the immigration numbers. But Premier Ford sort of making a little bit of excuses on that. He's saying that no matter what party is in charge, immigration is a tough file. It's tougher when you're stupid, and it is a little bit tougher too when you don't want to actually do the things you need to do to get immigration under control.
Calls for immigration. Immigration does not fall under the province. I do my best, but it falls under the federal government. And be very frank, no matter what party's in charge up there, immigration's a tough file up there. No one seems to be able to get it together, no matter if it was the Conservatives or Liberals, because there's a tremendous amount of people. Give you an example. Yesterday, when I was with Mayor Chow, just Toronto grew by 237,000 people in 1 year.
Yeah.
Like, where do you put everyone? Where do you put the housing, the infrastructure, the roads, the highways? I go down to towns in the U.S. and big cities are 230,000, 300,000. It's like every year we're getting a city like the size of Boston, it seems. So we're doing everything we can to keep up with the immigration.
Yeah, well, we don't necessarily have the ability to keep up with the immigration. We have to stop it and curb it. And Quebec seems to be doing an okay job. I mean, starting to anyway. by limiting the number of immigrants that they can receive. Yes, it's a federal issue, but the provinces have to push back. I mean, look what Saskatchewan and Alberta are doing in the energy sector. Why can't Doug Ford grow a spine and get a backbone and start doing something like that about the record immigration? Because Ontario receives over half of all immigration that comes into the entire country. And then they end up primarily in the GTA, in the Greater Toronto Area, and along the 401 corridor. So this tiny space of land is receiving the vast majority of immigration for the entire country, and it is increasingly overwhelming. So where, every so often Premier Ford shows like a little inkling of being a real conservative, and this is perhaps one of those very brief moments, but he just can't seem to get it over the line. Like, he's so close, but just not quite there.
Well, and again, same as when he was talking about crime, right? Like when his car was almost stolen and we've got to keep these thugs in jail. I would like to remind him that he did everything he could do to sabotage the campaign of the Conservatives in the last election, making sure that Mark Carney got elected so that you can continue your immigration spiral. He says, well, it doesn't matter who's in Ottawa, nobody can get it right. Well, maybe we could try somebody different. Perhaps we could try. Like, I remember the Harper years, things were not this bad, right? Like, things have really gone downhill in the last decade, especially if you remember the before times. If you were sort of an adult who remembered, well, like I was able to buy a house and have a little money in the bank, maybe even take a vacation and afford not no-name groceries at the same time. I think the Conservatives, by and large, did get immigration right. When Stephen Harper was in government, we had a skills-based immigration tract. It was economy-based that, like, okay, maybe certain parts of the country, they aren't graduating welders fast enough and they need welders. And, we've got some welders from Eastern Europe and they've got, skills that are transferable to ours. We're going to plunk those Eastern European welders in northeastern Alberta where they'll hit the ground running. That's how we structured our immigration system. Now it's just a frickin' free-for-all. And a lot of the problems in Toronto stem from the fact that the Liberals changed the rules that you can claim refugee status at Pearson Airport. That's how they fixed that loophole, by the way, when they were coming across the border at Roxham Road. And they're like, we closed Roxham Road. Don't worry about it. But you can make X number of refugee claimants at Pearson. And so what happens when they make a claimant at Pearson? Well, off you go into the Greater Toronto Area. And you've got all the refugees you can handle.
And here's where you sign up for all of your benefits and all of your free, your healthcare, your housing, your dental, your food allowance, your clothing allowance. Here's something for your housing allowance. It's out of control.
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't disagree with Doug Ford that refugees or immigration is a tough file and Toronto is absorbing too many refugees and immigrants and they can't keep up. But your buddy Mark is doing that and you did everything you could to get him elected. So it feels like he's talking out of both sides of his mouth.
Which is, not uncommon for Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford. But anyway, as of 1:30, so about 20 minutes ago, that's Eastern time, of course, Prime Minister Mark Carney, which I cringe every time I say that, has announced steps to support Canadian steel and aluminum producers by counter-tariffing the U.S. So he, I think, is making an announcement as we speak. But this article from Bloomberg reads that he is expected to. So it's in response to U.S. President Donald Trump's 50% tariffs on the aluminum and steel sector here in Canada. And he's currently holding a news conference in Ottawa, where Carney will outline new measures to keep the sectors afloat while Canada tries to work out a deal with the Trump administration, according to people familiar with the matter, asking not to be identified as the plan is not yet public. So I wonder actually if maybe after the stream we finish here, we could just maybe restream that press conference for anyone who's interested in staying on and staying tuned.
That's not good. That is going to have Carney and Trump Trump's not going to have any sort of real talks with the Canadian government. That was like the breaking story out of the G7, which wasn't breaking at all. I mean, they just agreed to continue to talk, which is like,
always, we're going to have conversations, and this is supposed to instill public confidence. So don't
it's
worry,
like,
we'll talk.
So the status quo, actually, nothing changed, nothing got done. Okay, great, thank you. You spent $1 billion on this. But the counter tariffs are going to result in more tariffs from the Americans, and Trump said as much. So, like, don't be surprised when this comes. And what will Carney's solution be? We're going to give money to the steel sector.
Money printing, more inflation.
That we don't have. Don't have. Yeah.
No. Well, we don't even have a budget, remember? So
Right.
I guess you can just make it rain because there is no budget, and there's no plan to balance it or even release it. So there you have your elbows up government, Canada.
Yeah. I'll let you pick the next thing. I don't know how long.
Well, I think we have this breaking news clip from the White House, Trump on U.S. military action against Iran.
Okay.
Regarding the ongoing situation in Iran, I know there has been a lot of speculation amongst all of you in the media regarding the president's decision-making and whether or not the United States will be directly involved. In light of that news, I have a message directly from the president, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks." That's a quote directly from the president for all of you today. So we'll kick it off for questions here in our new media seat.
2 weeks seems like a long time to kind of take. It sounds like kind of a wait and see approach to me.
Right. And then on day 15, when something bad happens to Iran, they're going to be like, what happened? What? We thought we were talking, like they did with Israel.
Conversations.
Yeah. Speaking of Iran and Israel, I think we should just touch on Anita Anand, and then we've got Michelle Ferrari, who's on the ground, saying something completely different. Anita Anand, who has failed upwards into foreign affairs, says, "We are assisting Canadians who want to leave the region impacted by the ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran." She said they're extremely concerned about the quickly evolving conflict between Israel and Iran, and we urge all parties to show maximum restraint. Okay, so but they don't mean all parties. They just mean Israel, right? Like they just want Israel to stop bombing nuclear targets. In the interest of Canadians in the region, we're planning commercial options for Canadians in Israel, the West Bank, and Iran to leave the region via certain neighboring countries. This is in addition to ongoing efforts to assist Canadians attempting to leave Gaza. The airspace is not open, so Canadians have to cross the border into neighboring countries, and we have consular services available for them. Then she said, we have deployed additional consular services across the region, including to Israel, the West Bank, which is also Israel, Anita, Jordan, Turkey, and Armenia. We are developing further options with our allies. We strongly encourage Canadians in the region to register to ensure they receive timely communications directly. And Rick Perkins, who it's a great shame he's no longer in the House of Commons. He I believe is currently in Israel, by the way. He says, this is a massive lie. The daily emails from your department are worse than useless and have never offered to find arrangements out of the country. I know, since I'm one of the more than 6,000 Canadians registered.
Wow.
Every Canadian I have spoken to has had the same experience of total uselessness from the government and lack of contact or assistance. And Vivian Bursavici, who used to be Stephen Harper's ambassador to Israel, she said, "No, you're not, Anita. They're calling me and others. Stop digging, put the shovel down, do something, and stop talking and doing nothing." And I think do we have the clip from, or the tweet? I'm trying to find it, from Michelle Ferrari, who is also a former Conservative MP, and she's also in Israel, saying that what Anita Anand is saying is absolutely not true. She says it's a flat out lie. I'm on the ground in Israel, and there has been absolutely no communication about an evacuation plan. None. Stay tuned. I'm going to expose just how disgracefully the Liberals have failed stranded Canadians again.
Ooh, that sounds enticing.
Yes.
Yeah, she was the former Minister of Families and Children, if I remember correctly.
Yes, she was. And Rick Perkins, not former minister, critic, shadow minister,
Yes,
family and
yes.
safety. And Rick Perkins, he was my favorite on the Green/Fund file. And he unfortunately lost his seat, but he's also in Israel and being screwed around by foreign affairs, who are probably happily evacuating people from Gaza, though, as we speak. So priorities from this federal government.
As always. Well, we're up against the 2 o'clock clock, so let's maybe just touch on our daily dose of cringe to lighten the mood, and then I think maybe we'll just restream that Carney presser if it's still ongoing.
Yes, it is, as you know, the holy month of Pride. And so during the holy month of Pride, there are certain cultural demonstrations that you will see in and around government. Canada is particularly bad because not only do we have the holy month of Pride, we have something that is longer than Advent. It's an entire season. By a season, I mean what we used to call summer. Now that's Pride season. So I think it's longer than Advent and Lent combined for this new religion of, I guess, gender diversity. And so Oregon, which may as well be Vancouver South, the Oregon House of Representatives put on a drag show on the House of Representatives floor. And I think we should all watch this together because this is very important cultural performing that is important for everyone to see, including little children. They will learn a lot from seeing this, I'm told, by the left. So let's watch it and become enriched together.
Oh.
Okay, I
mean,
don't know
I
about
just
you,
don't
but
understand why.
Yeah, like, what am I looking at? Like, even if the choreography were okay, complicated something, but we don't even have that. This stuff makes me less tolerant. I just want everybody to know. I become less tolerant the more I watch this writhing and prancing. This is not there's no performance. It's just writhing
It's
and
just
prancing and
weird
strutting.
and weird gyrating. Like, why? Again, like, seriously, why is this necessary at all? And how exactly does this teach inclusivity? That's what I always go back to. I'm like, how are drag queens and kings and like gender bending cross dressers, like, how is that the model of how to be inclusive? Like, aren't there other ways that we could teach children kindness, inclusivity, compassion, understanding? This is just bizarro adult entertainment, twisted and subverted, and somehow now promoted onto children as some sort of like beacon of how to be tolerant and inclusive. And I don't understand. Like, if someone could explain it to me as though I'm 5, I would really appreciate why this is supposed to be what we look to become inclusive.
Right. Like, I subscribe to the motto of live and let live. You do your thing, I'm going to do mine, but they just won't let me live. They just won't leave me alone everywhere. Do your thing. I don't care. I just want to pay for it. I don't want little kids exposed to it. Like, I'm like you. If someone could point to me how men in sequined ladies' underpants reading books to little children increases childhood literacy rates, if they could give me proof, at least we would have an argument for why we need to do this other than the sinister motives I ascribe to it. But we don't have that. Like, they can't even say, like, look, Sheila, this helps the little ones read. It helps them, it interests them in books, and at least there would be like a pro on their side. But we got nothing. It's all cons. Like, it's all cons.
And it's not even good routines. Like, there's not even any talent involved in this. Like, maybe if these people were, you know, talented, the best of the best, great routines, amazing coordination. I mean, there's nothing to aspire to here. It's sloppy. It looks ridiculous, and you're being laughed at because none of it's being taken seriously. So I would say it's actually working against whatever it is it's trying to promote, because people are just like staring at you blankly and then laughing behind closed doors.
Yeah, like I said, this stuff makes me less tolerant. I
like it's ridiculous. They're not even talented.
The more I dislike it. Yeah, they're not even talented. The choreography stinks. Like, it stinks, and I'm not an expert in anything. But I just don't enjoy it. I know what I like, I know what I don't like, and I do not like that. Okay, I think that's the show. Are we?
We have a clip, and maybe we'll end on this clip. So we'll just wrap everything up. Thanks everybody for joining us, for all of our viewers, everybody behind the scenes who make sure that everything is accessible and links are ready to go and makes the stream possible. And we'll see you back here same time, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, ahead of our weekend. So we'll end with this clip of Carney, who's just announced retaliatory measures against the US to apparently protect Canadian steelworkers, because elbows up, Canada.
They're going to get it from Trump. Just watch.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message, because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. Members get instant access to all of our shows, invitations to exclusive events, and access to our premium content like live events.
The world wants to do much more, and work much more closely with Canada, and we're ready. Now, on Monday morning, I, with colleagues, met with President Trump to discuss international priorities as part of the G7, but also to further negotiate a new economic and security partnership between Canada and the United States. And as we've said repeatedly, we'll take all the time we need to get the best deal for Canada, but no longer. And seeing progress that's been made, President Trump and I agreed to pursue negotiations towards a deal within the coming 30 days. We'll continue these negotiations, of course, in good faith. In parallel, we must reinforce our strength at home and safeguard Canadian workers and businesses from the unjust U.S. tariffs that exist at present. And that's why we're announcing that Canada will be introducing a series of countermeasures to protect Canadian steel and aluminum workers and producers. And there's several, and I'm going to list them. First, Canada will adjust its existing counter tariffs on U.S. steel and aluminum products on the 21st of July at the end of that 30-day period, in other words, we're going to adjust them to levels consistent with the progress that's made at that point on the broader trading arrangements with the United States. Secondly, we will implement reciprocal procurement rules ensuring that only Canadian producers and producers from trading partners that provide Canada with tariff-free reciprocal access through trade agreements can compete for federal government procurement of steel and aluminum. The Government of Canada will also review its remission framework for automobiles to favour the use of Canadian steel and aluminum in Canadian-made products. And finally, we're creating 2 government stakeholder task forces, one for steel, one for aluminum, to monitor trade and market trends and to better support government decision-making and workers going forward. Remind that the $10 billion large enterprise tariff loan facility remains open to help affected businesses access the liquidity they need and to return to financial resilience as the market stabilizes. In short, the government is responding to the impact of the unjust U.S. tariffs with multiple tools. We will review our response as the negotiations progress. I'll be meeting with the premiers of the provinces and territories tomorrow to discuss this response and our broader coordination going forward. The next week, I will attend the Canada-EU Summit, as well as the NATO Summit, as part of Canada's new government's mission to strengthen and build security and economic partnerships with reliable partners. And this week, in this House, the Parliament has the opportunity to pass the core of our domestic economic response, the One Canadian Economy Act, because together, we as Canadians can give ourselves far more than the Americans can ever take away. Steel and aluminum workers are on the front lines of this trade crisis. These are the workers who will help us build one strong Canadian economy, the strongest economy in the G7.